When you're like expanding to meet customers' needs that haven't needed to be met before, is there some pressure you're fighting against to avoid becoming more like an agency format? Like it seems like it would be as easy to accidentally become an agency when you're building
Yeah, I mean,
software tools.
we've done feature development on request actually quite a lot in the early days. We don't do that anymore, but we used to. My view on that is as long as you build it in a way that is a component, but we don't actually build something just for them. Like for instance,
Mm-hmm.
one of our users once, that was like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, emailed us and say, "Hey, I'm building like a voice app where you can register a sound and upload it to the server and then play it back." And he was like, and we didn't have that feature at the time, and it was like, things are moving sooner than I thought. I'm meeting some investors next week. I would love to be able to show them something. Well, that's one of the value of being a very small company. Like I told him, well, for a one-time fee to make sure, the one-time fee was not even to make money, was more to make sure that he was serious. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think we quoted them like $3,000 or something, which is not huge, but it's significant for an individual. So if you put $3,000 in something, you're probably going to use it. And then I dropped what I was doing and I was building that. But then now today, everybody uses it. And not everybody, but a ton of people uses that feature. So as long as you build something that is, a component, and you retain, obviously, like the deal is always very clear. We build a feature for you, but we retain the IP. So the way we used to call that was sponsored feature. So we basically would sell you the right to change a little bit our priority list. If you do that, you make money on a one-time basis as a service, but you don't provide a service. You just improve your product. So it improves your software development. Where you're actually, my concern here is not necessarily to turn into an agency, but more to have too many features that go in too many different directions. And so sometimes we would still say no, just because we think it was not a good feature. And so then we would say sorry. But today some features I might be like, that's kind of weird because we pretty much close to feature completion. But 3-4 years ago, honestly, there weren't that many ideas that were bad because we were in the early days where we just needed all these features.
Are like freelancers and things using Bubble as well for client work?
Actually, it's an important driver for us. My guess is that 20% of our growth probably comes from agencies. What's interesting with these agencies, so it has changed a little bit now that Bubble is a little bit more well known, but for the early years, it was always like former users. So what we saw, and that is very much our acquisition model, to get new clients, is someone discovers us. At that time, that was a lot on Product Hunt, has an idea for a product, so learns Bubble, build a product, realize it's not going anywhere because most startups' ideas are actually not very useful. But then he has, hey, now I have this skill where I know that I can build something in like 2 weeks that would probably take like 3 months to a traditional development shop to do it. Why don't I try to build like a to disrupt a little bit the market by offering a much cheaper price, but that still make me a very good living for the number of weeks I work on, because Bubble is much faster to build. And so we had a lot of people doing that. If you go to bubble.io/agencies, you will see all those agencies. On the top of my head, I would say probably 60 or 70% of them are like former users that converted into agencies. And the reason why I say it's an important driver for our acquisition strategy is our best users right now are people that hired a bubbler. So I believe, it's kind of an inside evangelization system, if you will, where you get people when they're pretty young, building their own thing, even if it's a side project, then they become aware of what they can build, and then they start being hired by a company, and then they realize, which is the case in every company, which is, software is not moving fast enough for the business needs. And at some point, that person will stand up to go to his boss and say, well, actually, you know what? I think I can hack that pretty quickly if you let me do it. And then, if the boss is desperate enough, which often is the case because engineering is slow, then after a week, he's like, oh, wait, you did this? And then, the guy takes another dimension inside the company. And that's how we start having more and more apps inside the user. We had I could think of at least 10 accounts that pair us on the top 10 decile of what we have. That started that way.
It's interesting. Do they become considered like an engineer internally, or like would it? Are they
I don't know. Actually, it
person?
depends. I mean, we have some users that introduce themselves as technical co-founder now. Mm-hmm. We have some people that actually are proud to say, no, I'm not an engineer, but I still build things. Usually they call themselves bubblers, but bubblers, it's really in the context of bubble. But whether they want to picture themselves as engineers or business people that can do things without code, it's up to them. My guess is with the rise of the no-code movement, we'll see more and more people being like claiming loudly that they're not engineers and they can still do things. 3 years ago, that was more challenging. I think 3 years ago, people would say, oh yeah, I built it with, a visual framework or something, trying to not get too much into the details of it because it's kind of a stigma to be a no-code tool. Now it's changing.
Is that just because the mind share has increased that these tools exist, or why is the attitude shifted?
And the tools have gotten better. I think the market pressure for what we do is stronger than ever, and I don't see it going down ever. The need for software is more and more everywhere. At the end of the day, whether you want to start a company or whether you're running an existing business, productivity gains are going to come from like automation technology. And so everybody is fighting very hard. Business situations change fast. The development cycles of products has gotten a little bit better, but it's not accelerating the same as a business situation. And so everybody needs faster something that fits the need. And that's why, again, like a way to describe what we do is a no-code tool, but another way to describe what we do is really, we make building things much cheaper and faster. And that pressure is a very fundamental one that will stay being there and that will make products like ours more and more widespread.
Bringing it back to like your plans for the next couple of years and expansion, you mentioned that your focus is still on like people starting companies. You want to be like the default choice. What do you see as the roadblocks to being the default choice now?
So there are two things. I mean, one thing which is not a problem for people, but like we need a few large success stories to make sure that people have faith when they build on top of us. Technically, that means we need to improve a few things around performance. That's probably the biggest issue we have right now. It's a challenging problem, because when you let people build things without exactly knowing the technical aspects of it, they tend to do things that are not optimized. Like basically they build database queries that are really not optimized. And so it's kind of the business we're in to make sure it works regardless. And so that's what we're working on a lot right now, but that's from a technical standpoint, that's a bigger thing. From a user acquisition standpoint, back to the success stories, I think our biggest work is an evangelization work, to be honest. Today, we still hear, for instance, we have some drop people that start using us, they realize, oh, it's going to take me 10 hours to learn and they drop. The reason why is that, of course, I mean, we could try to invest to go from 10 hours to 7 hours, but 7 hours would still be too long. The real problem is a communication issue. If people knew and believed us that, oh, after 10 hours, you can build Airbnb without code, they would spend the 10 hours because the same people will spend, 200 hours in Code Academy with actual limited results, or even worse, $10,000 in boot camps, to learn how to code. So the real problem for us here is evangelization and communication issue, trying to make sure that, people actually believe that this no-code thing is real and that you can build fully functional products. It's not easy because, again, the no-code space is booming, but every product out there has a little bit of a different offering. And like you can't build Airbnb on Webflow, for instance. Airtable is great for what it is, but you can build a web application on top of it. And so it's a little bit of you have some noise a little bit in communication. So at some point, our biggest roadblock is to figure out the right way to make sure that our value proposition is extremely clear to our users, that they believe us, at least most of them, that it's working. And then we'll get to, and then I think things will be much easier because, again, economically, from an economic standpoint, time to market and time to iterate, which is another great value of having something that is faster to build. Like, honestly, like today, if you, between Bubble and code, I mean, Bubble is much advantageous because if you want to iterate on your product within a week, you'll get something that would be much faster than if you hire engineers.